By the end of this tutorial, you will have a complete boilerplate with Python code to work with the Assistance API and start building your own bots. So if you're a developer and you're interested in working with OpenAI's models, then make sure to stick around. I'm not only going to show you everything that you need to know about the Assistance API right now, but I'm also really going to provide you with a framework, a boilerplate in Python that you can use to build applications and bots using the Assistance API. So let's first start high level with what we're actually going to create. So I'm going to walk you through the Assistance API docs, but really what I found is if you follow all of the instructions over here, which are pretty clear to follow, but then when you want to actually put this into an application and make all of the various pieces communicate with each other, that's really where you need some custom logic. So I've created some functions for us that we can go through and that can really help you to put this all together. Like I said, you create a framework to reuse this. So I'm going to walk you through this project, which I will make available via GitHub. Link will be in the description. And this is part of a larger project that I'm working on and mainly building a Airbnb WhatsApp bot that can assist hosts by answering frequently asked questions, which we have over here and we'll get into. But for this part, we are only going to focus on the AI and the retrieval part of the data. So really a common use case for the Assistance API. Now the rest of this project, so building out the whole bot, will be covered in future YouTube videos. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe so you can stick around for that. So if you want to follow along, make sure you have an active Python environment running and you have your OpenAI API key ready. You can clone the repository or start from scratch, create your own. There are requirements in here. For this tutorial, you only need the OpenAI library. Flask won't be needed for this one. And then we can get into it. So I start with a simple load over here. Let's quickly get this up and running. A simple load to load the OpenAI client for us to interact with. So this is really the basis and it's the same as you would normally use the OpenAI client and the OpenAI API to work with these models. But now let's look into the assistance that we can now create. And you can either do this through the UI, so I can follow this process, click create, all of that, but we are going to do this from code, obviously. But first, real quick, to get some context on how these assistants are different from the regular OpenAI, let's quickly go to the playground and show you what's the difference between just the regular chat, which is, for example, what you would use like 1 month ago before assistance, and how that compares to if you use the assistant. So this is all from the UI, from the playground, but it works the same behind the scenes when you're using the API. Let's start from the example of the WhatsApp bot that we're trying to create. And I'm going to fast forward a little here. But if I ask regular ChatGPT Turbo, what is the check-in time? It answers over here, a check-in time is typically between 3 and 4. So this is just randomly based on the available knowledge within OpenAI's models. Now, let's quickly show if I switch to the Airbnb bot that we're going to create and let's ask what is the check-in time. Then we can see what's going on over here. It's making various requests, it's thinking, and then ultimately it will provide us with the message saying the check-in time for the Airbnb is 3 p.m. And then we can reference that in here. Check-in time is after 3 p.m. This is the fundamental difference that you have to understand over here. When you use just the regular API, GPT 3.5 Turbo or the new GPT 4 Turbo model, you're interacting directly with OpenAI's models without giving it any context. So essentially the answer that you will get from the API is the same as you would get using ChatGPT, for example. But now with the assistants, we can provide tools, namely functions, code interpreter, and retrieval. And in this tutorial, we'll focus on the retrieval part and see how we can provide our bot, our assistant, with this data, in this case, the PDF document. So that is a really important concept to understand. And if we then look at this from the API side of things, what I was just doing in the playground, so for example, doing a simple completion with ChatGPT or GPT 3.5 Turbo, we can here see the same response, check-in time generally, etc. So before the Assistance API, this was the only way to interact with OpenAI's models. And if you wanted to provide extra data, extra context to these models, then you would have to build your own solutions for that. You would have to set up a vector database, use OpenAI's embeddings, for example, and then use a retrieval augmented generation process, for example, which you could build using LangChain. That was just a lot of custom code and development that you had to put in place in order to work with these models using your own data. And I wanted to show you this because you first have to understand how it previously worked to fully understand the benefits, but also the downsides of using the Assistance API. All right, so now let's continue with the creation of our first assistant. And here you can see the code for that. So we can use client beta assistance create, and then we have various parameters that we can put in: name, instruction, tools, models, etc. One important thing to note is we can also put a file in here. So here you can see we're giving it a name, etc., and some instructions on how to behave. So this is a simple prompt, but then we specify that we want to enable retrieval for this agent. And if we enable retrieval, we should also provide it with some data. That is how retrieval works. It decides with every question, okay, is this a question that I should search my own data for? And the API also has functionality to upload your own data. And we can do that with the following. So we can have client files create, and then file, and then we open the following file, and we also give it a purpose. So if you look at the project and go to the data folder, you can see the Airbnb FHQ PDF document in here. And that is exactly the one that I linked to. Let's store that, and then we can come over here and we can say upload file, and we're going to put in the data path, but then let's see, we are over here, and let's see. Let's store the file, and now we can upload that and also make sure to store that. Okay, so now behind the scenes, we're uploading data to OpenAI, and we now have a file which also has an ID. So we can use that right now with the creation of our assistant. And for context, this is something that you would do, for example, using the UI, coming over here and then uploading a file. Let's see, we can come over here to files, and you can now see I just uploaded this one, and I can also click on this and I can see my file here. So that is data management and how you can do it through the UI and through the API. So now that we have that over here, we can come to our create assistant. So let's look at what's going on over here, and for the sake of demonstration, create a number 2 because I already have this one. And what we now have to do is we can run the create assistant and then put the file we've just created, put that in here. And this should still be in memory. Let's see, file, we still have it in memory, and create the assistant. So within the code, this is a one-time process, and that's why I'm doing it kind of like flexible over here. So later on, we don't need that as we start to interact with this. So this is something you can either do like in a notebook or in a separate file normally. But let's run all of this and see what's happening. So we are now creating our assistant, and now we have a WhatsApp Airbnb bot assistant 2. All right, so that is really the first step, creating your assistant and providing it with data. And now if you're new to AI or data projects, or if you're a developer that want to get a better understanding of these AI applications, then a good resource that you can check out is ProjectPro. So ProjectPro is a curated library of end-to-end projects, and they have more than 250 completed projects in here, all related to data and artificial intelligence. So we have machine learning, data science, deep learning, NLP projects. And for example, here is one LLM project to build and fine-tune large language models. Here one on LangChain. So with these projects, you not only get the complete code written by industry experts, but you also get video walkthroughs, documentations, and even architecture diagrams. So this is really one of the best resources to go through if you want to get a better, deeper understanding of data science and artificial intelligence. Tutorials on YouTube will only get you so far. If you really want to get in depth, follow these complete end-to-end projects, then make sure to check out ProjectPro, link will be in the description. All right, so now we've created an assistant, but how do we interact with it? And that brings us to the following concept, and that is threads and messages. And this is important to understand. If you want to dive deeper into this, make sure to check out the docs. But what OpenAI has done is they have allowed developers to very easily keep track of different conversations and the messages within all of that. And a thread is basically a whole history of messages. And I think the easiest way to describe this is if you go to ChatGPT, you have your account, but on that you also have the different conversations that you have, right? So each conversation there is a different thread, which is different messages. And by separating threads using an ID, a unique ID, we as developers can very easily keep track of that, not only between different conversations with the same user, but also, of course, between different users that are on our application. So, for example, in the context of the WhatsApp bot, when I send a message to the bot using my number, we of course want to keep that separate from the messages you are sending to the bot. So let's see how to do all of that. So we're going to work on a function that is called generate response. And we're going to start pretty simple and we're going to build that out. So initially we cannot generate a response with this because we first have to create the thread for every new user and then add a message to it. So it's pretty straightforward. We start with the client beta threads create. That will create a thread. So this is now created and we can look at that and it has an ID, created at, and it has some metadata. We can also get the thread ID by calling the .id, and this will allow us to now have a variable that just has this thread ID. All right, so now we've created essentially a single conversation that we can use to send messages to. All right, and now next we are going to add a message to that thread. So that is using beta threads message create. So we'll start with the user role. So whenever someone sends a message to the bot, this is added as a user role. And then we put in the message. So we can do that over here and it takes in the message body. So let's actually store that and let's take the example of the check-in time. Where is it? Over here. So we have a body and we are going to run this. So let's do that. And we now have a message object, which we can look at. And this is a thread message. It also has an ID. But here you can see it does not have an assistant yet, nor does it have an answer. And that is because this is just a way to prepare the message before sending it to the AI model. So, and now if we actually want to run this assistant, let's get to the next steps. We get into runs and run steps. So I have a follow-up function. Let's look at this. And this is called run assistant. It's a lot of code. So let's really go through it step by step, so you understand what's going on, because this is probably the most complex part, because this is where everything comes together. So remember that we have created a thread also with a thread ID. So that is to keep track of our conversations and our messages. We also have a message, what's the check-in time? And now we have to send this to the assistant that has context of our data, so access to the PDF document, and then it should reply based on that. So let's see what we have to do. So first we have to retrieve our assistant again, and we use that using the retrieve function and calling the ID into this. So we can load that, and then you can see we have the assistant. So how do you get the ID? Well, you either get it from the assistant variable that we created in the previous step, or you go to your assistants and you can see the ID over here. So two ways to capture that information. So that's the first step. Then we're going to retrieve our thread. And this also requires an ID that we put in here. How do you get that? Well, also from the previous step. So we get an assistant and we get a thread. And again, to check that is correctly stored, we can see assistant's ID, thread ID. All right. And now this is where we can bring everything together. So we can run all of this and put in the thread ID and the assistant's ID. And now since we've added the message to this unique thread ID, now whenever we run this, that is when everything starts to come together and when the interaction with the AI model will be made. So this is pretty complex. There are actually a lot of things going on behind the scenes to bring all of this together. So I really want to go step by step here and show it with a real world example. All right. And we're not done yet, because the thing is, if you just run this, we can see nothing happens. There is no response. I can look at this and it just has an ID. It has the assistant's ID, canceled. It has all the information, completed at, created at, and that is because how they handle this run object. And if we then come back to how this actually works, it explains what's going on over here. And again, you should read through this to get a better understanding, but this piece is very important. In order to keep status of your run date, you have to periodically retrieve the run object. So you have to check this object. If I come over here without retrieving this one more time and looking at the status, it still says queued because this is when you initiate the run. But now, and this is where this piece of logic comes in, it's a little while loop to iteratively check the status of the run object. So this has run for a couple seconds already right now. I'm now going to skip to this line and run just this part, so not in the while loop. We'll check that in a bit. But if I retrieve this one more time, just visualize the run object. We can see going all the way over here. All right, so now we have status completed, and that is something we can access by calling run.status. You can see completed. So this is something weird right now in the API, and it's definitely because it's still in beta. It also says we're planning to add support for streaming to make this simpler in the near future. So right now you literally have to build in some mechanism, and I right now put in a time.sleep to check every like half second whether it's already completed using this while loop. So this while run status is not completed, keeps checking the run status. So this is a little workaround that you have to do right now that I've not seen in any other tutorials yet. So now let's see what we got over here. So the run is completed, which would cause it to break out of the while loop. And now we can get the messages. So how does that work? Well, we have beta threads messages list, and then we put in our same thread ID again. So remember, the thread stores all of the messages. So let's get all of them, see what's in there. And then we have a message object. And here is all the information that is stored within the messages. So this could be a lot. And to get the latest value, you have to parse it like this. So this is all JSON data. And we get the data, first element, then context. And then if we print a new message, we can see over here, we get the same answer. The check-in time for the Airbnb is after 3 p.m. based on the time over here. So that works out. Awesome. All right, so that was the full loop from creating an assistant, giving it tools and data, and then getting to a user response. But now let's take that one step further and see how we can bring all of this together in an application framework. All right, and I'm going a little faster now because there's a lot to cover, and you can also check out the code yourself, follow the comments, and it should all be pretty straightforward. But what we got going on over here, we have separate pieces of functions. First of all, for thread management, for generating responses, and then for running assistants. And we want to do this to enable the following. So let's think of this example again from the WhatsApp bot. And let's say we have John and we have Sarah, and they both have their unique WhatsApp phone number, which is a unique identifier for them. So in this case, 123456 for Sarah. And they have different questions. Now, we want to ensure that the threads are handled correctly. And this is something that out of the box is not possible, because when you create a thread, it uses a uniquely generated ID. So if you later want to reference that and say, for example, this thread belongs to John, you have to create some kind of a database mechanism to keep track of that. So when the next time when John with his WhatsApp number sends a message, you know which unique thread ID to retrieve from your database. So that's really what we're going to focus on and what I'm going to show you right now. So that is basically the only thing that's added, functionality for that, but that really is what bridges the gap between just a demo from the quick start and turning this into something useful. And for the database solution, we're going to use a very simple Python library called Shelf. And that is a persistent dictionary-like object. And it's a very easy way to store a dictionary that we can use for later. So I will show you what that looks like. But you can just as well use any kind of data storage that you would like. So we have two functions that we're going to store. That is check if the thread exists and also to store it. And we're going to base this on the WhatsApp ID in this case. So we're going to reference whenever John sends a message, we're going to check, hey, does this WhatsApp ID, this WhatsApp number, is it already present in our database? If not, we'll create a unique thread for it. And that is what is handled over here. So you can see if a thread does not exist, create it and store it. So we'll check that. So if thread ID is none, we'll first call this function, check if thread ID exists. If not, we'll create it and we'll store it. And you can see here, store thread. And how we're doing it, we open threads underscore db, which will show up over here in our project once we start to run this. All right, so let's now see what we got going on over here. So let's quickly store all of this. And now let's say we are John, and John is new to, he just booked the Airbnb and he wants to know what is the check-in time. So let's see, I've included some print statements to also show the name. And now let's run this to see what's going on. And here we can see creating new thread for John with WhatsApp ID 123. So it correctly identified that there is no database, which there is right now. You can see threads.db is created, and then it generated the message. So here's the message. And then finally it says to John, check-in time for Airbnb is after 3 p.m. And it also links to the source. So that's pretty awesome. But now let's see what happens if Sarah sends a message. Let's run that. And again, it correctly says creating new thread for Sarah. And again, we get the response, and this is now sent to Sarah. But now the cool thing over here is if we take another message and let's say John asks like, hey, what was my previous question? So it says now retrieving the existing thread for John because it's already in a database. And to John, your previous question was asking about the check-in time. Okay, awesome. But now what if Sarah asks that same question? And then to Sarah, your previous question was about the pin for the lockbox. So this is pretty sick, right? And if you have some development experience, you know probably what's going on behind the scenes and how much work it would take to properly set that up, that user management, to keep track of all of the messages and the conversations and integrating all of the AI models with the data. And we now have that in about 100 lines of code. So this is a complete OpenAI service that you can use to interact with the assistants. And this is something I haven't seen in other tutorials yet. So most people would just cover the quick API steps over here, but this is just the basis. And you really need functionality like this to bring it all together. But now an important question for you as a developer: should you go all in on this assistance API and use this to build your AI applications? And to answer that, I'm not sure. I would say I'm a bit hesitant right now to convert my existing and ongoing applications that I'm building for clients to this new framework, to this new API. And my current method is to build most of this functionality that I've just showed to you all custom. So mostly using LangChain, vector databases, performing the similarity search and the embeddings, all of that. So it's a lot more work, but I already have the code and the frameworks for that in place. So once you got that up and running, it's pretty easy to replicate. And the upside is that you have a lot more control over what's going on. So with this approach, you're uploading your data to OpenAI and using it from here for retrieval. So I know that for most companies, most clients, this is a no-go. And also from a data management perspective, this is definitely not ideal. That combined with the fact that this is still in the beta version of it. And while testing it, I have found some scenarios where it did some weird things, where it said things like, hey, I cannot answer that, or I don't have information on that, where it was literally in the PDF document that I provided it with. And this is something that has never happened to me with my Pinecone setup, for example. And it was found in some logs that they apparently use the Quadrant vector database. So there are definitely some things going on behind the scenes that you don't have full control over. And of course, when you build custom software, when you build custom applications, that's one thing you do want. You do want that full control. And as of right now, I feel like it's really a step in the right direction to make things easier for developers. But right now, I feel like it's still not there yet. That said, I think it's important to keep a close eye on this API and at least understand how it works, providing your assistants with functions and code interpreter and retrieval and potentially other tools. It's definitely the direction that we're heading. And the concepts that are integrated within this API, so effectively managing threads and messages, those are all concepts that you have to understand. So I would still recommend dive into this, play around with this, but for full-scale applications, like I've said, I would still be hesitant and I would still revert to, for example, looking into LangChain and choosing your own vector database and build it out like that. All right, so now you have a good understanding of how the Assistance API works. And if you want to learn more about this and want to learn more about working with data, then make sure to check out my free group, Data Alchemy. Link will be in the description. We have 4.5k members in here. The community is very active. We discuss all things AI, but also there is a classroom in here where I teach you the Alchemy Codex, which is my unique way of working with data and Python, especially good for beginners, but even for seasoned developers switching to data science and artificial intelligence. So make sure to check that out. It's completely free. Like I've said, link in the description. And then that will be it for this video. Thank you for watching. As always, I would really appreciate it if you like this video, and also make sure to subscribe to stick around and make sure you don't miss future updates. For example, the complete WhatsApp bot video that I have in the pipeline. And for those of you that have been following me for a while, my apologies for being away for some time from YouTube. It's been some weeks since I've uploaded. I did some traveling, I did some moving. My girlfriend moved in with me, and it was just a lot combined with all the client projects that I'm currently working on with my business Data Lumina. So there was a lot of stuff going on, and unfortunately I didn't have enough time to put out YouTube videos. But I've freed up some time again. I'm back at it, so hopefully we'll get back to some consistent uploads, because there's just so much going on in the world of AI, and it's really exciting. Also sometimes hard to keep up with, you know, one week you learn this specific library and this tool, and then the next week it's all obsolete by some new update. But yeah, that's just the trade-off of being really at the forefront of this AI revolution. And yeah, like I've said, it's really exciting. Again, thank you all for watching, and see you in the next one.